Hello everyone, this is the Cathaltist, and I just beat Dark Souls 2. I know it's been a while since I put out one of these videos, but basically over the last few weeks, maybe a month or so, I've been slowly working my way through the game, and basically trying to go through it in a way that I was able to get to every single aspect of the game. I wanted to see it all in one run. I know things will change once I go into New Game Plus, but basically I wanted to make sure I fought every boss that I possibly could, got every little secret that I possibly could find, and record it all for you guys to see. Unfortunately, when I went back to make the next video in the series, I realized that a good bit of the footage that I had for it was corrupted. And then so was the next one. And the next one. And the one after that. The one after that turned out pretty well. But then the one after that was also corrupted. So, we lost huge chunks of the footage. Essentially, there was no way to really salvage it so that we could make a full Let's Play out of it. So, instead, what I've gone through and done is sort of save some of the best moments from either boss fights or just little parts during the game, mostly from the early game since that's the stuff that I had the most of that was still uncorrupted, that I really either enjoyed or felt like really showed off interesting aspects of the game itself. And yeah, that's essentially what you're seeing in the background here. Now, feel free to just completely turn the sound off if you don't want to hear me talk through all this, because essentially the rest of the video is just going to be me rambling about what I thought of the game and how we're going to proceed from here on with it. Because I definitely do want to keep making videos of it. I just have no material left from my actual run that's really all that usable. So, as far as what I actually thought of the game itself, it was great. There is no way that I wouldn't suggest this game to anyone who enjoys, well, specifically anyone who's enjoyed any other part of the Souls series so far, but really anyone who's ever enjoyed any kind of dark fantasy or action RPG, that sort of thing. Do I think they got everything right with this installment? No. Was there a lot they could have changed to make it a whole lot better? Oh yeah. Was it as good as Dark Souls 1? I don't think I'm the right person to ask about that because I've got too much invested in the first game to really say one way or the other. However, I am one of those weird people who didn't like Demon Souls as much as Dark Souls, so I will say that I think it's better than Demon Souls. But again, take that for what you will. I still think Dark Souls 1 is the superior game. They fixed a lot in Dark Souls 2 that was wrong with Dark Souls 1. And I don't know. Even with all those changes, Dark Souls 1 I still feel is the more... And this is going to be very weird to say, considering how incomplete the game was. Or not incomplete, but how much was changed at the last minute. I feel it was the more completed game. The story elements, the placement of bosses, the fact that everything in Dark Souls 1 was where it was for a specific reason. Usually something lore-wise and everything. This one, you definitely get the same feeling that most of this stuff is here because it belongs here, it fits in with the history, but some of it is just... I don't know. It didn't feel quite the same. Which again, not a bad thing. There is nothing wrong with Dark Souls 2. It's a great game that I'm going to end up dedicating a ton of time to. At least as much as I dedicated to Dark Souls 1. But I still feel that Dark Souls was the superior game. Now, as far as what I liked about this game, all the mechanics that they implemented in this one that weren't in Dark Souls, or the things that they improved upon, as far as actual movability, how attacks work, how bonfires work, the PvP, and just general multiplayer. All of that stuff has been so greatly improved upon that it just feels so much better than it did in Dark Souls. And yeah, it's hard to even compare the two in that aspect. Oh, slight spoilers if you haven't started playing this one as far as what's going on in the background here. You can just ignore that if you want and be surprised when you get to this point in the game. But actually, that brings me to another part of what I really liked about this one. The homage that's paid to things that came from Dark Souls and Demon Souls within this game is just fantastic. And the way that they decide to go about doing it is one of the best implemented ways of like rewarding someone who's played the old game that I've ever seen. Essentially, if you played through Dark Souls 1, if you played through Demon Souls, you're going to notice bits of lore, item descriptions, boss mechanics, things like that are hinted at or referenced in here that people just playing Dark Souls 2 won't understand right away. Basically, if you played Dark Souls 1, item descriptions in this are either going to be very interesting to you or very humorous to you, because they essentially play out like someone is describing them while piecing together the history with only minimal information about what they're looking at. It's basically a historian looking back on what they think some aspect of the history might have been. Whereas if you played Dark Souls 1, you know exactly what it was. And even though we came away from Dark Souls 1 with so many more questions than actual answers about a lot of the lore, having played through it, you'll know more about it than whoever it is that is describing some of these things in the item descriptions to you. It plays out so that it's almost like, since you were there during that part of history, you know more about it than the people of this age. So, I'm just trying to think, like, actually, case in point, there's an item in here that comes straight from Dark Souls 1 called Elizabeth's Mushroom, and it mentions Saint Elizabeth and how she was not only renowned for being so incredibly wise, but that it's believed that the only thing that matched her extreme wisdom was her sheer beauty. Anyone who's played Artorias of the Abyss knows that Elizabeth was a giant talking mushroom. Whereas in this, she's referenced as a human being, and an incredibly beautiful one. Or so the person who is describing the item to you would have you believe. But yeah, all of that was absolutely fantastic. You could go about playing Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls and come into this and catch all these little Easter eggs and references that people would have no idea about going into this as their first Souls game. However, on the other hand, you could also play this first, find all of this stuff very interesting, and then go back and play Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls and suddenly realize that all these things that are referenced in here actually do play out in Dark Souls 1, and to some extent in Demon Souls. I love the addition of the Moonlight Greatsword in this one. I know it's been in all of these games, but the way they put it in this one was fantastic. The Lord Souls make a comeback in a very interesting way. Again, if you're watching this, spoilers, pause it right now if you don't want to know a little interesting tidbit about this. We're actually fighting what I believe is the reincarnation of the Witch of Izalith right now. It's either her or Quela... No, which one is it? Quelana... One of them. Anyway, it's either the reincarnation of the Witch of Izalith, or it's her actual daughter, the one who teaches you pyromancy in the Great Swamp. But either way, we'll have a nice little lore video or series later on when I figure out what we're actually going to do with this. Some of the only things I didn't like about this one were the actual, and this is going to be hard to say since it's what made the series so stand out so nicely for me to begin with, were some of the boss fights. They were just boring. A lot of them were very bland, very simple, and again, I know this stuff changes when you get to New Game Plus, so I'm expecting a much harder time with it when I go back through. But on the initial run, they were just kind of... They didn't have the same value that they had in Dark Souls. A lot of it felt very reused and not in a creative way. But, again, it's little things. This is still an absolutely fantastic game. And I would recommend it to anyone who enjoys this sort of thing. So, I'll essentially just leave it at that. I am planning on doing another run, this time, since this first one took me so long to get through, and since I am going to save the character and move on to New Game Plus with him, I'm going to make a new one just to go through and see how efficiently we can get through the game. As few deaths as possible, that sort of thing. And, yeah, basically we'll see what happens from here. I do want to make some kind of lore video or lore series as soon as my throat gets better and I can breathe again. And, yeah, like I said, we'll wait and see how it plays out. But for now, hopefully you just enjoy the rest of the Lost Sinner fight. See you later, guys.